You know, when I first sat down to do this, I had to, like, do some soul searching and figure out how I had gotten away with not reviewing a Pokemon game this entire time, and I was trying to figure out what the deal was with that. And after a while I realized, I think I know what the problem is. Whenever I talk about Pokemon, it's not so much just a game to me, it's something else. I mean, it's a multimedia enterprise from the get-go, we'll start there, but then it also, I don't know, it like transcends everything else. Like, I look at Pokemon and I don't see just a game. I see something else entirely. Something beyond the scope of imagination. Something that transcends life itself! The Pokemon series, let's go!
You know what makes me bang my head against the wall and push me till I fall down, baby. The way you wanted it, and oh, I never seem to know which way you wanna go down, baby. And I can't take this in. Bang my head against the wall and push me till I fall down, baby. The way you wanted it, and oh, I never seem to know which way you wanna go down, baby.
You know, when I got around to actually approaching how to do the video, I initially decided that I really was trying not to approach this in the way that everyone else has. I am not the first person to talk about the Pokemon series. In extension, there are so many other YouTubers out there that have talked about the Pokemon series and the Pokemon games to such a length and depth that nobody got time for that. Less not me. But I decided that I should probably try to talk about, like, my unique individual story of Pokemon, because there's a lot to unpack here. Because the other thing about Pokemon that I realize is unique to me is that I have a lot of fond memories of Pokemon. I'm still a Pokemon fan, but I also have a lot of bad memories of Pokemon. And not a lot of game series can say that. And I'm not talking about just, oh, there were some bad games. No. In fact, there are very few bad Pokemon games, to be honest. It's not that. It's bad experiences, because the thing about Pokemon is that it's a social interaction too. Things that I have always had issues with. And you know, when you're growing up and everyone's doing the same thing, in this case Pokemon, you know, suddenly you have to interact with people who, you know, last week didn't actually talk to you at all. And let's just say that, you know, not every interaction went great. Like, I've already told you the Flareon story, in my top 10 favorite Pokemon of all time. That's just one tale of woe from me about this. So, there's that. But that's not the Pokemon game's fault, and it doesn't taint my viewpoint of them. I love those games. It's just something that I have to sort of work through. So bear with me, okay? Just like, issues. So most of you have probably seen, you know, most histories of Pokemon, how it was originally called Capsule Monsters, and how it was pitched to Nintendo like 8 times before they were agreed to fund the project. And even then it was only because Miyamoto said it was a really good idea, and they were like, well, if Miyamoto says it, then But let's just skip ahead past all that, because you could look up 18,000 different histories of Pokemon and get all that information. I don't need to tell you that all again. What I can tell you is my perception of the world of Pokemon. Now, when Pokemon was announced, I actually wasn't keeping track of things, and in fact, at the time, I was not at all a Nintendo person. In no way was I really interested. I possessed a Game Boy, but I didn't really play it that much. I only had one game that just came with it at the time, and I didn't have a single other Nintendo console at that point. I only had, if memory serves, my Genesis and a PlayStation, and that was it. So when all of a sudden all the kids at school were talking about Pokemon, I was suddenly intrigued by why were all the kids at school actually talking about a video game? A, one that I'd never heard of. B, a video game? You guys play those? Well, they did now. It is going to be impossible for me to explain just how overwhelming the popularity explosion Pokemon had in the late 90s when it first came out. It was daunting. Pokemon was everywhere. There's a reason why there's Pokemon cards and a Pokemon TV show and Pokemon toys and Pokemon action figures and Pokemon books and Pokemon everything. You couldn't get away with it. I still remember walking down the street in my hometown to the local 7-Eleven where they had on the front counter for impulse purchases a box of base set Pokemon cards. Booster packs. That was a thing. You don't get that anymore from like anything else. I mean, I think I remember Yu-Gi-Oh! Having that a little bit, but it was not to this extent. It was enormous. And when I realized the game was actually available for a console that not only had I neglected, but possessed, I immediately requested that my parents purchase this game for me. Now my parents, being fully aware of my issues with bullies, decided to overcompensate a little bit, and not only did I get Pokemon Red version, but they also got me a link cable so that I could trade with people at school, which would backfire horribly. Again, see the Flareon story. Another thing to consider when I first started the game, I had never played an RPG at this point, which is what Pokemon is. And again, in my head, like, it doesn't click because Pokemon is like such a different case from like the typical JRPG fare, but at its core, that's what it is. I had never played anything like it before though. One of the reasons I think Pokemon is really good to get into, especially when you're a kid, is that the Pokemon doesn't act like you're anything but a kid. Not only is the main character effectively a similar age than you are, but he doesn't go around doing anything super amazing. He just walks. He's not like a superhero. He's not like, you know, some chosen one destined to rule the world or save the world or anything like that. He's just a kid who likes Pokemon. And that's what you are. And suddenly, all of a sudden, the world of Pokemon is so much easier to relate to just as a child, wanting to be able to think of yourself as being able to do the things that the game world allows you to do. I still remember consulting one of the kids I did talk to about starting the game up, and I remember the reason I chose Squirtle as my starter, and yeah, you were all gonna ask who I was gonna pick, was A, it makes Brock a lot easier, as he put it. Also B, most of the other kids were choosing Charmander, and well, water. Fire doesn't like water. Ta-da! So anyway, you pick your starter, you fight your rival, who I'm pretty sure I actually named after the biggest bully I had at the time. And I know I keep flipping back to that, but that's the reason why why Gen 1 like resonates with me so strongly. It's just, there's so much stuff that went on with it. Like, you don't even know. I'm not even gonna tell you everything, but whoa. In any event, going on to tail the random encounters level up system, you guys already know most of what I'm about to tell you, but needless to say, at its core, the random encounter JRPG fight the bosses fare was pretty stock for a typical, you know, role-playing game. What was new was the idea of collecting all these different creatures, training them up and raising them to fight for you, picking your team of 6, developing a starter, following the story, and exploring the world. For some reason, Pokemon in particular was able to make a 2D world which on its surface you'd think would look pretty plain, feel immersive and interesting. I would sit with my old gray brick Game Boy under the single lamp I had in my bedroom late into the night, just getting lost in this world. It didn't help that with the media domination Pokemon had, I was watching the anime, I was collecting the cards, I had everything Pokemon at the time. I still remember going to see the first movie, thinking, oh my god, it's so cool, oh my god, it's Mewtwo, oh my god, that's so cool, and then we got to get into the game itself and the idea of legendaries and unique Pokemon, having to traverse the map trying to find out where all the secrets were. You talk to the other kids at school, try to figure out where things are. Like I remember one of them told me, oh, there's a Zapdos to the power plant. I went to the power plant and oh my god, there's an electric bird, it's gonna eat me, oh goodness! And then, like, I found Moltres by accident, and that was cool, and then afterwards everyone was like, no, you gotta go to the one cave because Mewtwo's there, and all this was going on, and it wasn't just playing a game, it was a social event before the internet was really on its feet. And then even after the game, they told you about the Missing No trick so you could duplicate items, and then Missing No, I think, led to the issue of there being, you know, Poke Gods and mysterious Pokemon that only I know how to get, and you gotta beat the Elite Four like 18,000 times in order to get one, and it's like a combination of Blastoise and Venusaur or some such nonsense. In any event, things got cray-cray. Okay? That's what I'm trying to say. It was nuts. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is a game that lets you really get immersed in the experience and actually bond with these creatures that you were finding. And I think that's one thing that a lot of other games that aren't Pokemon but tried to be Pokemon don't have. They don't have the idea of you raising these creatures from the get-go and training them up to be, you know, strong warriors, but also friends, companions on your journey. Most people use their starters all the way through, not just because at the time we were dumb and thought the starters that we had to keep them, but also because they were there from the get-go. You got attached to things. That's why it hurt so much when the one bully stole my Blastoise from me. But I managed to bond with another Pokemon that I had, Flareon, which is still my favorite Pokemon of all time for that reason. Also, it occurred to me that I also had my holographic Charizard card stolen from me, so that wasn't good. The point being is that things like Digimon, which I talked about a little bit more recently, don't have the same feel when it comes to that, I find. Digimon World 2, for example, does this thing where, like, you DNA Digivolve and combine your Digimon together to make new ones, but then, like, how are you supposed to bond with any of them on any kind of level? They're just bits that you just, you know, put together to make better ones. They're effectively just thrown away. It's not like in Pokemon where, you know, you have this Pokemon, you want to raise them. It's true, when you're trying to get all 150, like I did, and you lock them away in the PC forever and ever till the end of time, that can seem kind of cold, but they've addressed that with recent generations when it comes to where the Pokemon actually go when you put them in the PC. But in any event, the point being, the first generation of Pokemon and its influence on my generation of young kids is not a thing that's ever going to be met. Most Pokemon fans I talk to now are from Gen 3, and y'all are so adorable with your Tricos and your Mudkips and whatever else you got in that generation that I skipped over. We'll talk about that a little later. The point is, I'm a G1er, and I try not to be, you know, oh, you damn kids don't know what it's like about it, but it's kind of a magic that it's hard for me to express with people. It's something that I got to experience that I can't completely, you know, make everyone else understand what it was like being in that generation when Pokemon really hit home. In any event, the games themselves were really interesting. You had two different versions of the game, thus encouraging you to not only buy multiple copies, but also trade with other people. The anime kept hitting home the 150 Pokemon thing. Oh yeah, you gotta make sure you get them all. It's really important you do that. Oh my god, there's a 150 and one. Oh, it's a secret, oh god! Anyway, but then they released the yellow version to go inside with the anime, so you had Pikachu following you around, and that was really neat. It also made Brock complete another nightmare because, oh my god, rock type versus electric type, I'm gonna die. And once you get through your journey, you beat all the gym leaders, you get all the badges, you collect everything, you do all the stuff, you stop Team Rocket, the villains of the story, you get up to the Elite Four, and you smash your rival in the face and become the champion. It looks simple now, but this is where things really got started. This is where Pokemon first began, and this is where everything just went nuts afterwards. You know, we got spin-off games before we got sequels. We got Pokemon Pinball up in here, which is actually a great game, by the way, just for reference. We also have the Pokemon card game video game, which, while the logic of it is confusing, not only did it actually teach me how to properly play the card game, but it was a great game on its own. So there was that. And of course, Generation 2 would come around after the fact, but this is where things kind of got weird for me with Pokemon. I'll talk about the games first because they are a great experience, and I think Gen 2 is arguably one of the best generations out there. It's definitely a close second to my personal favorite. In any event, it added a lot of things that were missing out of Gen 1 that they were originally supposed to add, such as genders and breeding the Pokemon to make new Pokemon that you can raise from birth. It also gave you 2 regions to go through. Not only do you go through the new Johto region, but then you go through the original region of Kanto again to fight all the old gym leaders. So you go through the Elite Four twice, and then you go up to the top of the mountain and fight the main protagonist from the first game and beat him in a battle and become the ultimate Super Omega champion, I guess. I don't know how that works, but it was cool, it was awesome, it was amazing. You got a day and night cycle, you got times, you got a phone, which is actually really annoying, and like, stop calling me, I don't care about your Rattata, it's 1 a.m., where are your parents, oh my god. It was everything we could have wanted from a sequel to these games, but in addition, it was supposed to be the last. Game Freak didn't think they were going to make a Gen 3. They did, again, later, but Gen 2 was here. And, you know, the story was pretty decent, it tied directly into the first one, and I'm not sure, outside of direct sequels, that we've gotten a generation that has addressed the events of a previous generation so directly outside of Gen 2, it actually makes me wonder and a little bothered by the fact that a lot of the new generations don't seem to address the world around the region they're working with. I know Gen 2 was designed to tie directly into Kanto since you go through it, but other than cameo appearances and things like that, it's kind of sad that Game Freak has never attempted to do anything like they did with Gen 2 again. They also, in the new Crystal version, which was after Gold and Silver, they allowed you to play as a female, which they were originally going to do from the start. I don't know what took them so freaking long with that feature, but there you go! Hooray! Gender equality! Anyway, but as I said, this is where things got weird for me with Pokemon. Like, I look at it now and I love the games, but at the time I remember thinking, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I think part of it was the anime in retrospect. See, the anime did this thing, and in fact most of the marketing did this thing, where they just kept hitting home, you know, that there's 150 Pokemon, 150 Pokemon, there's always gonna be 150 Pokemon, except for Mew, because it's 151, it's super rare, and you don't know about it, and you know, oh my god, is it out there? It's mysterious. But then all of a sudden, Johto comes out, you know, Gold and Silver, and there's like 100 more Pokemon that are just been sitting there. And the anime initially tried to write home the idea, oh, these are newly discovered Pokemon. First of all, they all kicking around and just chilling. Nowadays, the new generations have adapted the idea of, oh, there's different regions across the world and different Pokemon exist in those regions. That makes sense. But back then as a kid, I didn't think of it like that, and it wasn't presented like that. They just seemed to present it as if it was, oh, nobody knew these Pokemon were here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure somebody knew those Pokemon were there. And the fact is, Professor Oak is just like, you gotta discover all 150. I made this Pokedex just for the 150. I was like, oh, that's great, Professor Oak. Did you not think to just cross, you know, regional boundaries and just, you know, check to see if there were more than 150 Pokemon in the universe? You didn't think about that. No, you didn't. You failure. I don't know. I was a kid, so I didn't think about it, but I think the other problem is that this is where Pokemon's popularity started to dip down a little bit. The buzz, you know, in terms of non-gamers had worn thin. People were getting tired of it, people were getting burnt out on it, and all of a sudden, the very same people who I had originally played the game with had decided that Pokemon was just for little kids. And, you know, why are you playing that game? You nerd, you dork, you loser. And I'm like, weren't you all playing the game last week? I'm just saying. I mean, you know, Retrospective is 2020, guys, but like seriously, come on. But fortunately, my Pokemon journey did not end with Gen 2. Tune in to part 2, where I will discuss my fall out of the Pokemon cycle and my entry back into the community as a teenager. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.